Sí, mientras nos acomodamos, quisiera hacer una pequeña prueba de la traducción. Me dicen que el canal 2 es en inglés. Si pudieran hacer para verificar acá. Sí, perfectamente. Perfecto. La prueba del canal 2 está perfecta, lo escucho perfecto. Aquí, cuando yo hablo en español, la invitada lo escuchará en inglés. Y entonces el canal 1 es para la traducción. Bien, perfecto. Muy buenas noches a todos. Doctor Leonel Fernández Reina, presidente de la Fundación Global Democracia y Desarrollo, expresidente de la República Dominicana. Doctora Josefina Pimentel, rectora del Instituto Global de Altos Estudios en Ciencias Sociales y pues parte de una muy agradable y coincidencia de la cual nos honramos también, ex ministra de Educación, formando parte de un muy selecto grupo de 3 ex ministras de Educación que nos acompañan el día de hoy. Nuestra querida maestra, la profesora Ligiamada Melo Cardona, Alejandrina Germán, amigos todos de la Fundación Global Democracia y Desarrollo, muy buenas noches. Nos complace mucho darles la bienvenida a esta conferencia sobre Viviendo con la Inteligencia Artificial, a cargo de la profesora Cynthia Breazeal. La profesora Breazeal es pionera en la robótica social y en la interacción entre humanos y robots. Es científica y emprendedora estadounidense en el campo de la robótica y profesora del MIT, directora junta también del Media Lab del Instituto de la Tecnología de Massachusetts, mejor conocido como el MIT. Fue cofundadora de la empresa de robótica social para el consumidor Jibo, en la que se ejercitó como científica y directora de experiencia. Actualmente es la decana del Open Learning de MIT, directora del grupo de robots personales del MIT Media Lab y profesora de artes y ciencias de esta misma institución. La conferencia de hoy versará sobre su campo de trabajo más activo y más reciente, el cual se ha concentrado en el tema de vivir la vida cotidiana y la interacción cotidiana con la inteligencia artificial y en comprender gradualmente los impactos a largo plazo de los robots sociales. Es directora también de la Iniciativa del MIT sobre Inteligencia Artificial Responsable para el Empoderamiento Social y la Educación, MIT Race, del cual también hablaremos más adelante, y creadora del currículum Day of AI, un currículum introductorio a la enseñanza de la inteligencia artificial para escuelas del K al 12. Su grupo de investigación estudia activamente los robots sociales aplicados a la educación, a la pediatría, a la salud, al bienestar y al envejecimiento, entre otras áreas. La profesora Breazeal ha recibido cientos de premios internacionales por sus inventos, diseños y creaciones. Y su participación en esta conferencia y una serie de actividades que está desarrollando en la República Dominicana se corresponde con una colaboración conjunta entre la Fundación Global Democracia y Desarrollo, el Centro MIT Race, que ya mencionamos, y la Organización de Educación Iberoamericana, OEI, con el objetivo de introducir la enseñanza de inteligencia artificial en el currículum K12. El MIT fue creado con este objetivo, ya que la inteligencia artificial está transformando nuestra vida personal y profesional, todas las tecnologías que utilizamos a diario, transformando el futuro y transformando la forma en que trabajamos y nos educamos. Incluir la inteligencia artificial en el currículum educativo K12 va a contribuir no solo a preparar a los niños y jóvenes en su alfabetización, si se quiere, sobre esta tecnología, sino que también será un componente, aparte de ser un componente del programa curricular, el mismo uso de la inteligencia artificial en el proceso educativo en sí tiene un impacto significativo en la educación K12 al permitir, entre otras cosas, una mayor personalización del aprendizaje, proporcionar retroalimentación inmediata sobre el proceso de aprendizaje, ofrecer herramientas de evaluación y identificar inmediatamente también y corregir dificultades del aprendizaje, entre otros. Desde Funglobe nos sentimos muy entusiasmados con esta colaboración conjunta con el MIT Race y la OEI, y sobre todo muy entusiasmados de contar con la visita de la profesora Breazeal como parte inicial de este proyecto. Quiero aprovechar también para agradecer a Linda Rodríguez, nuestra querida y apreciada colaboradora en Massachusetts, quien ha sido fundamental para este proyecto y para la visita de la profesora Breazeal. Gracias a todos por su asistencia y sin más preámbulos les dejo con la profesora Cynthia Breazeal.
Muchas, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank President Fernandez for his kind invitation to have me come and speak to you tonight, and Funglobe for hosting just a fantastic visit that I've been having here, my first time in the Dominican Republic. And I'm delighted to be joining you tonight to talk about which is artificial intelligence. So I'm dressed like my picture. No. So living with AI. You know, we talk about working with AI. I think we're starting to move into this very different kind of time in our relationship with technology, where it's becoming an ever more artificial intelligence. It is a technology that is influencing and transforming many different industries. It's driving economies, study disciplines. It's having really transformative effects. So some of these images here are showing how drones are being used in agriculture, for instance. So I'm sure we've all heard about autonomous vehicles, or of course, a lot of use of artificial intelligence in medical diagnostics, or in, you know, Amazon warehouses uses robotics in order to do logistics and warehouse retrieval. A lot of work you're starting to hear about with these new AI methods called generative AI. We do media and creative expression and music and visuals, and even being able to synthesize faces and voices. So it is being used in many, many, many different aspects. I expect this is going to continue. You know, when you look at from industry, where this field is going, you hear, you know, kind of projections such as this, you know, a significant part of jobs will start to use artificial intelligence and tools to do our professions. Often when you have disruptive technology, it creates new industries, new skills, new jobs. And so this challenge of how do you prepare our children for the future for jobs 20 years from now that don't exist yet today. So one example for me is when I was a graduate student, the World Wide Web was just starting to come into existence. At the time, you had to be a computer scientist to make a web page. But then, you know, a few years later, suddenly the job of web designer and tools became intuitive and easy to use, that you could be a designer and then create a website. So these tools have a way of evolving. So how do we prepare our young people for these jobs that don't exist yet? So the future-proofing question. And then this opportunity space where there's a projection of, you know, millions of new jobs leveraging these kinds of technologies, being able to design artificial intelligence, and yet the number of people in the workforce today is like in the hundreds of thousands worldwide. So this huge opportunity gap of hundreds and thousands of people in the workforce today with these skills and opportunities for millions of people with these skills in the future. So there's a huge educational opportunity there as well. This is just, to set the stage of how artificial intelligence is kind of shaping many, many, many different parts of our lives. And of course, we're starting to see it enter our personal lives. So with the advent of the Amazon Alexa smart speaker coming into our homes, being able to interact with AI just through our voice, transformed who in society interacts with artificial intelligence on a daily basis. From children to our oldest adults, you didn't need to be savvy with technology to interact with AI. So this is another facet that's kind of transforming how we've been incorporating AI into all aspects of our lives. So I'm going to talk about a particular kind of artificial intelligence that is a field that I'm recognized as being a pioneer of, a founder of. And that field is called social robotics. So I'll tell you that when I started graduate school, when I started studying artificial intelligence, people were not thinking a lot about how people and robots would be able to actually work together or collaborate. Artificial intelligence was kind of this in-the-box thing. We were just trying to understand algorithms of decision-making and learning, but really thinking about how you create a technology that anyone could be able to interact with without explicit training was an open question. So when I was thinking about what would that look like, you think about, at the time when kind of exotic technologies that you had to be an expert to be able to program and use, and then the question of the personal computer and how you put a computer on every desk, and asking the question, how would you need to build an autonomous robot, sophisticated AI technology, such that it could be anyone could be able to interact with it. So my intuition, we knew that people would anthropomorphize robots already naturally, but that robots would need to be socially and emotionally intelligent to be able to understand us, to be able to communicate with us and collaborate with us in a human way. Not us changing and training to learn how to interact with it, but it needs to have the intelligence to know how to interact and collaborate with us. So that was the beginning of this field of social robots. And you can imagine kind of my inspiration came from, watching Star Wars when I was 10 years old and falling in love with the droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO. So that always has been kind of my guiding vision for this very humanistic, natural interaction with autonomous robots. So, when you think about what it takes to build a machine that is socially intelligent, you start to study psychology and the literature of our human intelligence, you become very humbled by how sophisticated our human social and emotional intelligence is. And when you think about everything that we've built, everything we've achieved, our history, it's all because of our ability to collaborate and interact and communicate with one another. So these kinds of skills, like being able to empathize, able to understand and infer what your mental states are, like your beliefs or your goals or your desires or your feelings based on your observable behavior. These are very, very hard things for a machine certainly to be able to do. And it turns out over, many, 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 years, our brains have evolved specialized circuitry in our brains for social intelligence. So this is just to say, this is a very hard problem. It's a very hard problem. It's really kind of a frontier, I think, of artificial intelligence, but it's what we'll need to be able to figure out to really have intelligent technologies be able to support how we collaborate and how we communicate. So I'm going to show you one video, very early video in my group. This is maybe now like 10, 15 years ago, of a robot that is able to infer, kind of watch, this is my graduate student at the time, and infer what he is able to see. So this is a mental state inference. In order for, this robot he's almost like a little child, and he's got this toy, and he doesn't want my student to take his toy away. So he's kind of watching and kind of hiding and positioning it, right? So that he kind of keeps it hidden. So that's an example of mental state inference. So here's the video. So you can see as my student is walking around, the robot is watching him and very carefully trying to reposition the robot, reposition the toy so that my student can't see it, right? So I'm sure you can all appreciate when children do this. So, but this is an example of kind of sophisticated social intelligence and, again, mental inference of what Jessie can see and therefore know about the world, and how the robot needs to adjust its behavior to kind of keep its toy. Okay, so this is like a very simple, but not simple, but a quick example of when we talk about social intelligence, what we mean. So this question then of social intelligence. So a lot of this definitely speaks to kind of traditional areas of artificial intelligence, like the ability for machines to have machine vision, to use cameras to understand the visual world, or to be able to hear sounds of speech and understand the spoken word, to be able to learn and so forth. But with social intelligence, there's a very human-oriented kind of focus around that. So when we talk about perception of the visual world or the auditory world, in social robotics, it's all about understanding human facial expressions, body postures, poses, like what are we thinking and communicating through our observable behavior. So this is what we would call kind of machine perception of interpersonal cues, of emotional cues. When we talk about learning, I'm sure you've heard about technologies like deep learning and training on data sets. But when we think about a robot in our home, you're not going to be feeding data sets to your robot. You want to be able to teach it, to train it, maybe like a dog, or maybe like another person, but even through the interaction from your but in a way that's more of a social collaborative process. When we talk about our expressive cues, it turns out that when people interact with these robots, we intuitively are reading the robot's social cues, what it's looking at, its body posture, whether people have designed that intentionally or not, and people are trying to interpret the robot's mental states through its behavior. So it's actually very important to intentionally design how the robot expresses itself, how it moves, how it directs its attention, so you have the correct mental information at the moment. And all of these, you start to think about the interaction, the collaboration, and how that can be designed in a way that can build a sense of rapport or trust or a sense of affiliation and alliance. So all these interpersonal social perceptions, as well as ability to coordinate joint action. So these are kind of the core areas of research, algorithmic research, that underlie what we would call social robotics. So as my group has been developing these core technologies, developing these core algorithms, we've had a kind of shift as we look at how AI is being applied in business and industries and as decision support tools and making people more efficient and industries more cost effective. Given the work that I do, I've kept thinking more and more about, well, so we talk about how robots or machines can help us be more productive, but can they actually help us as people to thrive and to flourish as human beings? Why don't we ever talk about artificial intelligence helping us to learn better or to be healthier or to grow and age with independence? Because these are profoundly important in terms of our quality of life. And certainly we should be able to design intelligent technologies that help us to flourish, right? That help us to become who we aspire to be. So it's a different kind of perspective on how and why we want to design socially and emotionally intelligent technologies. So I'm going to give you a couple examples from my work in my lab about how we've been exploring this kind of perspective. How do you design AI systems that promote human flourishing, human well-being? So, there's a number of kind of methodological challenges in doing this. So we've talked a lot about the underlying artificial intelligence and how you build for greater autonomy, greater capability. A place that even today we don't really understand well enough is when you deploy or when you integrate these technologies into real human environments, that you see the richness and the complexity of human life. And a lot of the kind of research that's done, it's been done in like labs and kind of simplified environments. But when you actually integrate these technologies into real hospitals, real schools, real homes, you start to really appreciate how complex the experience is that the robot or the technology is going to have to be able to understand and support. So kind of real world integrations are important. And then thinking about not just having somebody use a technology for 20 minutes and a task can be done, but what happens when it's living with you in your home for weeks, months, years. I mean, there's a time to think about this longer term relationship, this longer term personalization. How do you design for that? And what are the opportunities and challenges and even ethical questions around kind of living with AI over long-term interactions? And how do we evaluate the success of that? So I'm going to start with one example. We've been designing social robots that's very much inspired by peer-to-peer learning for early childhood education. So this is an example of thinking about how do you design a robot that can interact with the child as a personalized learning companion, that can interact with all those social and emotional supportive cues, that can personalize to the child, but support actually a learning outcomes. We've done a lot of work with helping children develop language and literacy skills through interacting and playing educational games with the social robot. So personalization, the social emotional cues, and the engagement and the learning aspect of that. So, this is kind of a very different way of thinking about how we relate to and interact with technology. This is one of our robots. It's obviously designed to be appealing to young children, but as a kind of playmate, right? As a helpful, kind of engaging, empathetic playmate where a lot of the games are played on a tablet. So there's a lot of content and exercises, but the child is actually doing this with the child as if the robot is playing these games. So when you think about it, it's, young children don't learn by typing or reading it. They learn through interaction and play. So it's actually a very challenging domain for us to really kind of push the ability of us to build machines that can actually engage in this style of interaction effectively, and not only to do it well, but to actually do it in a way that supports how children learn, that improves children's learning. So how do we do that? So this is an example where if we want a robot to basically be able to kind of play the role of a child in a shared storytelling interaction, when we can apply machine learning methods to capture and understand what this looks like in the real world, and then train algorithms to emulate that behavior. So in our lab, we bring children in.
Broke the window, and then it ran to school and peeked inside. He saw.
So we want to design a robot to be like an attentive listening partner. Lots and lots of data, lots and lots of children. Running effective computing algorithms to track facial expressions, what they say, feed this data into machine learning models to train that behavior that when you put it in a robot, it can engage a child in that interaction. So that gives you a sense of like how we develop these capabilities, how we kind of train and test these social capabilities in a robot. So this is now kind of, a year later, we've been training the robot to have these skills. We've integrated the robot now to be able to play educational games with children. We do a lot of collaborations with Boston Public Schools. So these are children, who often in the Boston Public Schools we work with, these are children that come from English language learning families. So they may not have grown up in an English speaking household. So the robot is basically designed to help develop language and literacy skills. So I'm going to just show you a video because I want you to kind of see what this looks like in a natural interaction. The child and the robot are playing a game. It's called Word Quest. It's kind of inspired by the game called I Spy, where there's a set of scenes and the child is given a challenge word, a vocabulary word. In this video, the word is lavender. And the child and the robot take turns panning through these scenes, trying to find things that match the color lavender. And they're invited to basically say the word of something that they choose. So I'm going to just play this video. First it's the child's turn. She makes a selection. she actually gets it wrong, and I want you to kind of see her reaction and how the robot responds to that in an empathetic, supportive way. Then it's the robot's turn, and I want you to pay attention to how she supports the robot. So it's really fascinating. Okay, so here's an interaction.
What are we trying to find? We are trying to find lavender color stuff. Okay. The word was lavender. Yes. What is lavender though? Girl jumping.
So she makes a choice. It's actually not right.
You will do better next time.
The robot encourages her.
In you.
You can see she's a little disappointed.
The robot's turn.
The robot says, I believe in you, and then leans, this kind of supportive gesture.
Is purple.
And you can see how engaged she is, right?
Just
so
like my friend
that allied engagement has made a huge difference in how she approaches this learning task. So now it's the robot's turn,
I believe.
and she says back to the robot, I believe in you.
The flower
So
is purple.
this social engagement is very deep. It's very deep. So, we then, we're scientists. We do a lot of randomized controlled trials, which is a standard psychology method to be able to kind of analyze and assess our intervention, our robot, is it making a difference? How is it making a difference? So we look at things like engagement. We look at measurements like body pose, facial expressions, even kind of skin conductance. And what we can show is children who interact with personalized robot through all of these indicators are more engaged. They're paying more attention. And so that's giving us a sense that not only the robot, but our personalization algorithms are improving children's engagement and attention in the task with the robot. We then also look at just classic pre-post vocabulary scores. And what we've been able to show is, comparing a baseline classroom with no social robot to a robot that follows a fixed curriculum. So you can think about this as just providing extra practice, to a robot that's personalizing through interactions with the child. So not only practice, but personalized practice with the children. We see that children's vocabulary scores are the strongest with the personalized model. But even the robot that's not personalized leads to greater learning outcomes than just the classroom baseline. So the robot is helping no matter what. And the more personalized the robot is, even better learning. We also look at the closeness that children report with the relationship closeness with the robot. And we are starting to see for the first time, the closer that relationship that children report is correlated with more positive learning outcomes. And so when you think about that, that if children have a better relationship with their teacher, they tend to learn better. We're seeing that correlation now with robots. And interestingly, when you add personalization, that correlation is even stronger. So we're starting to see this kind of relationship between personalization, relationship, and learning. So again, this is fascinating, right? And then you saw that moment where the robot says, I believe in you to the child, and then she says it back to the robot. We have seen this emulation of children's behavior with the robot, because when children learn from others, they learn all kinds of things. They don't just learn vocabulary. They learn things like attitudes and perspectives, right? That's just part of what we learn from each other. So if you design the robot to exhibit aspirational behaviors, like a growth mindset, right? What we see is children who play challenging games with the robot that exhibits a growth mindset. The child themselves not only identify more with having a growth mindset themselves, but they persist longer on challenging problems. So they start to exhibit a growth mindset in their behavior. And there's been lots of research that shows the more that a child has a growth mindset, improves their learning and their educational outcomes in general. So again, this is about a deep engagement, I would say, and kind of the power of this when you design it responsibly and appropriately. So that's just, to give you a sense of where things have been in our group. Now we have generative AI. I'm sure you've all heard about ChatGPT and these large language models. So we're starting to experiment with these newer artificial intelligence models and technologies. So, when you think about ChatGPT, well, it's text, it's not conversation, it doesn't have nonverbal cues. And ChatGPT is not designed to be a tutor, right, to play a particular role. So we've been leveraging these AI, but putting it into this educational context. And I just want to show you a fun video, because one of the challenges we've always had, especially when we do storytelling interactions, is that the robot has been traditionally limited in what it can say and respond to. But now with these large language models, the robot is much more flexible. So this is an example of, it's a demonstration. The story is the Three Little Pigs, if you're familiar with that story. And then the robot and the, in this case, my student who's playing the child are able to ask questions of one another. And it's really remarkable, I think, in terms of how flexible that interaction can be. And then you can notice the nonverbal cues and everything the robot's exhibiting also. Is this going to play? Well, nothing's happening. Yeah. Should I go back? Oh, here it goes. Okay.
Hi, Jibo.
Okay.
Can we read Three Little Pigs
So
together?
first they read the story together.
Hi there. I'd love to read it with you. Shall we get started?
Yes. Can you read it to me?
Once upon a time, an old sow sent her 3 little pigs out into the world to seek their fortune. Now be sure to write, she said.
So
And
just tell
remember
the story.
that I love you.
All right. Now the question and answer.
I'm Jibo and I'm here to help you read and understand this story. Let's start with the first pig. Can you tell me what he built his house out of?
I think it's made out of cakes.
So that's a silly answer, right?
That sounds delicious.
But it sounds delicious.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's right. The
don't
first
think
pig
it's
built
right.
his house out of straw.
So straw, right?
What would you use to build
What
your
would
house?
you use to build your house out of?
That's an interesting question. I think I'd build my house out of solar panels
Solar
that I
panels.
can power my home with
You know?
renewable energy.
So it's
Wow, that's very smart.
it's fascinating, right?
Thank
so this
you.
is all being generated by
What
these
do you
models.
think the third little pig did that saved him and his brothers from the big bad wolf?
I don't remember.
And now he's
Can
asking
you
for
give
a
me
hint
a hint?
Sure.
And the
third
robot's
little
able to
pig
frame
used
it
something to scare the wolf away.
as a
It
hint.
was something that was hot and crackling.
Oh, it set a fire. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. The third little pig lit a fire and scared the wolf away.
So again, I think, with these
Hey,
advancements,
Jibo,
I think we can advance.
can you write a haiku of this?
We can advance. So anyway, you can get a sense of the power now of these large language models in enhancing the dialogic capabilities of the robot. And so anyway, it's a rapidly moving field, and we are definitely trying to take advantage of all these technologies. Just in the big picture, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Khan Academy, but they are announcing this fall Khanmigo, which is their version of a personalized tutor for every student, but also a teaching assistant for every educator. So thinking about large language models, not only to help students learn, but to help teachers do their profession as well. So these tools and technologies are coming into education. And a lot of this, this is a very big conversation we're having in the United States as well as globally, is just the achievement gap because of the pandemic. So looking at novel uses of technologies, whether it's things like social robots or things like Khanmigo, to really help children basically close that achievement gap that's been due to COVID. So anyway, this is one of the big opportunity areas, I think, of AI and transforming education in K-12 education. So this is a set of advancements that's rapidly evolving. So, this is one of the kind of fascinating insights, I think, of the work I've been presenting to you, which is it's really kind of a new kind of relationship, right? So we study this. We try to understand, how do children conceive of their relationship with the robot? And there have been, colleagues of mine and others who have been very concerned that when you design a social robot, somehow that robot is going to replace human relationships. Somehow that robot is going to compromise or marginalize the quality of relationships they have with other people. So we've been studying that. And I can tell you, we have found no evidence of that whatsoever. In fact, children, even very young children, we're talking about preschool children, are very savvy in saying, this robot is a different kind of relationship. So there are aspects of how the robot engages with the child, which is like a motivating and supportive friend. So that's a human-like interaction. But as you could see through things like large language models, it's like a cool internet connected kind of tool so we can get access to information. That's very much like a technology. But then I think you could see from those videos, there is this almost like companion animal kind of sense about this is a non-judgmental, empathetic, non-human companion that I can make a mistake and it's okay. I don't have to be embarrassed by it, you know? So anyway, it is a different kind of relationship, right? And it's one that has an emotional engagement to it, as I think you can see in those videos, but more like how I think people engage with our pets. So people, I think, in some sense, like we always want to frame these interactions that people are, I say they're the protagonist in their own story, like they're the hero, but the robot is like the supportive sidekick. And so you're starting to kind of see that kind of be manifest in how we design these technologies, and that companionship is actually an important factor that leads to those positive benefits. So I'm going to give you one more example. So we talked about young children and learning. I actually want to talk about another really important topic, which is mental health. So we're coming out of a pandemic. You know, we've heard many, many reports of incidents of depression and chronic loneliness, and mental, emotional, like mood disorders is very much on the rise, right? So this is an area of big concern globally, exacerbated by the pandemic. So this is an area that we've really been focusing on in our work. So when you think about what AI could do that could make a difference in this area, I can tell you, you know, when I'm in the United States and I talk to educators and doctors, they will say that the demand, particularly for mental health support for students, is so high, it can take months and months before a child can even make their first appointment with a clinician. The demand is that high, right? So is there a way to create a technology that is ready at hand, that can adapt, personalized to the child, that can interact, or adult interact and monitor how their mood is, to be able to have more accurate assessments and to provide just ready at hand intervention. So you don't have to wait 7 months. You can have that support and that interaction in the comfort of your home, but also be connected to your clinician. So it becomes a tool, an extension of the care that clinicians provide, but in a way that's much more scalable and affordable and personalized. So that's the vision. That's the vision. The other vision is, if you can do this, especially for things like mental health, can it be preventative? So instead of having a health system that you wait until a person is actually in trouble, like clinically depressed, before you intervene or see the doctor, can you engage them in skills that keep them emotionally resilient in a preventative capacity so they never get depressed in the first place? Like, that's a big area of opportunity. We know in health, it's particularly in areas of behavior change, and a lot of health interventions are educational interventions. Again, rapport, social interaction, this also is really important to the best outcome. So similar to the learning example, health, this interpersonal social also is important. So one of the first explorations we did is we developed, so this is a different robot in my group called Jibo. We designed Jibo to serve as a positive psychology coach. So again, this is about prevention. It's not about waiting until a student, for instance, is stressed out and depressed, but try to help coach them in positive psychology skills so they're more emotionally resilient and don't get depressed in the first place. So all of those things I just mentioned to you, being able to be preventative, to provide daily support, these are things we want to explore in the context of a social robot for freshmen going to MIT. And as you know, if you're familiar with MIT, it is an amazing educational university, but it is very demanding. It can be very, very stressful. So often students' mental health declines over the semester as stress mounts. So the question is, can we design a robot in a way that doesn't have that happen? That's a big question. So again, we applied insights, therapies, interventions from positive psychology, proven interventions from positive psychology. Now, these are typically administered by a human coach. What if they could be administered by a robot coach? So a lot of these, again, are educational in nature, it's skill development. So this is an example of a number of these positive psychology exercises that the robot was designed to do with students. So I'm going to play a video here.
Today we're going to do an exercise called 3 Good Things. Research in positive psychology shows that cultivating gratitude can benefit personal well-being. I'm thankful for getting to be in your nice room.
So the robot
Being out at the
demonstrates
lab is a good change of pace. Your turn now.
and then invites.
Tell me 3 things that you're grateful for today.
So this is real video from a real student.
For being able to catch up on work that I was behind on over the past week. I'm thankful that my parents are having their 20th anniversary this weekend. And I am thankful for the good friends that I have in crew.
So this is also very fascinating. I mean, they give very rich answers to the robot. They engage in a rich dialogue with the robot when it kind of engages them in this kind of friendly, sharing, coach-like manner. So, the punchline is, again, we do carefully controlled studies and so forth. When we look at, these are standard psychological measures that clinicians use. We just now apply them to the robot condition. Over time, from the beginning of the semester to further in, typically all these measures would be getting worse over time. But the thing that's fascinating is they actually improved. So things like their sense of well-being, pre-post, their mood, and even their sense of their ability to change, all were enhanced when they had the robot coach versus no intervention. And again, typically all these measures would go down as stress, mounts in the educational system. So it's fascinating. The other thing, if we do open-ended interviews with the students as well, over 60% talked about the companionship as being an important attribute of this experience. So just having someone to talk to, it doesn't have to be a heavy conversation, but a light conversation makes a big difference for people. So again, this social interpersonal feature has real value to people, and it leads to greater engagement, which I would argue, is leading to these more positive outcomes. So it's fascinating. So we followed up. So this was a study done at MIT with freshmen in the dorms. We decided to follow up and do a longer study where we shipped 80 robots all across the country in the United States. And I can tell you this happened in the middle of the pandemic when there was a lot of social distancing. So people were literally locked in their homes for extended periods of time when we happened to do this study. And so we wanted to look at, again, do we see a benefit? But what if we had, in this, again, kind of randomized controlled trial, 3 different kinds of styles of interaction. So one, which is just the baseline robot with no positive psychology coach skill at all, just to see what that looks like. Then a coaching style. So the robot educates, tells you why it's important, encourages you to do these activities, but it doesn't do it with you. It's like a coach. And then this companion style, where the robot also shares a mental resilience goal and does everything with you as a companion. So again, just 3 different styles. Well, 2 different styles and then 1 kind of control, where we first assessed in this pre-period what people's, again, kind of psychological measures were, classical kind of clinical measures. Then we did the intervention for 4 weeks. Then we took the robot away and we did a delayed post-test to see how sticky those results will be. And so I'm just going to show you a video now of a variety of people using the robot. Again, things like being able to do daily assessments is part of the advantage of the robot.
Hey, every day, I'm going to ask you to log your mood.
Nope.
Can you answer the next 3 questions and pick the pictures that match how you feel right now?
Okay.
The first question is about how energetic or calm you feel.
So 3 quick questions. Again,
The
just
second
a
one is
daily
about how
assessment, light
positive or
touch.
negative you feel.
So kind of your mood,
The
your
final question
anxiety,
is about how much control you feel like you
how
have now.
controlled you feel. So again, this is all data that
Did you
goes
get a
into the
chance to
robot.
practice the gratitude exercise?
Yes, I did.
This
Tell
is
me
showing
more about
follow-up
it.
and follow-through.
It made me appreciate being grateful for these things.
So there's an exercise
is-
of expressing gratitude. The robot's asking, did you do
can't
it?
help but be positive
And
be
he
grateful
reports
for something.
On it to the
Remember
robot.
how we explored self-compassion last week? Before, I was always very harsh on myself, thinking that's the right way to make progress. But now I know it actually helps me to better when I'm warm and compassionate towards myself. It's a complete mind shift. What about you? Did you experience any change you'd like to share?
Okay. It's hard for me to love myself, and this has helped me make it easier. There are a lot of things I would change if I could, but now I'm embracing who I am. So I thank you for that, Jibo.
Wow, thanks for sharing that with me.
So again, just to say, there's some pretty profound, deep effects the robot can actually have through these interventions. And a lot of it is because of this social affective companionship style of interaction. So basically that's what we showed. We looked at those different styles and we found that the companion style was the most effective on a number of these measures. You know, for the coaching one, only one measure improved, but for the companion measure, all the measures improved. And even when we did the delayed post-test, we saw all those changes persist. So again, just to say, there's something fascinating going on in the psychology of engagement of people with this kind of experience that leads them to be more successful with the intervention. And that's the punchline. So two very provocative, very different applications, different age users, but we see this kind of similar insight, which is just to say, right, when we think about artificial intelligence tools and technologies, we're all thinking about just the cognitive, the decision making, right? But when you can design these experiences to support a more holistic human experience, and we as human beings, we are social creatures, we're emotional creatures, we are cognitive creatures, we're physical creatures. When you can design it to support the whole person, not surprisingly, people engage more deeply. And when they engage more deeply, they often are more successful. They have better outcomes. So I think, you know, this is I think an important insight that, I mean, a lot of the field is still trying to, like, you know, kind of agree with, but I think the data is really supporting this more holistic approach. Now, I've presented learning, I presented emotional wellness. Of course, there are a lot of ethical questions and concerns with building technologies that are capable of shaping and guiding and influencing our behaviors and our thoughts. So we are doing it to help people have a better quality of life and to achieve the goals people have for themselves. But you can use those same technologies to manipulate people, right? You could use the same technologies to do something that's very negative. And so we just have to be very cognizant and mindful of that risk. And so I'm sure you've been seeing a number of these headlines of the unintended consequences of a number of these AI, you know, technologies, from examples of encoding unintended bias into the decision-making of deep learning algorithms. So in one example, Amazon used trained a recruiting tool on all their hiring data. And basically they have a very male-dominated workforce. And so men were getting job advertisements, but women at a much lower rate. So that's a very unfortunate bias. So I think there's been much more appreciation of these risks. And so these systems have to be designed in a very ethical, responsible way. We've seen examples in law or over-reliance. So this is a case where they use ChatGPT to kind of research legal precedents. And sometimes ChatGPT just makes stuff up. And they did that, and it turned out it just put in a false precedent, and they got fined, right? So there was a college professor, who used an algorithm to try to figure out if students in his class used ChatGPT to write their final essays. And it came out that the algorithm said every student cheated, and he failed the entire class, and some of those students couldn't graduate, and it turns out it was wrong. It was wrong. So anyway, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of possibility, but there's a lot of risks, and we have to be cognizant of the responsible use of these technologies. And I would argue we need to have frameworks for responsible design. So in my own group, we've been doing a lot of design frameworks. So as you, as a person, try to come up with solution using AI, how do you think about all of these interlocking factors, including engaging the stakeholders who are going to use your technology to be co-designers with you? So we talk about social justice frameworks. So this is a new area as well. New design methods, design frameworks by which we build these technologies so that we can try to avoid those unintended negative consequences. And then, you know, I think there's a whole perspective. We hear a lot in the press about replacing jobs, you know, ChatGPT doing things that replaces human creativity. And, you know, there are very credible economists who basically make the argument, and I would agree that if you can augment people with these technologies, it will always be better for the economy. It will always be better for people. So augmenting humans with technology, and that could be AI, opens an endless frontiers of new abilities and opportunities rather than just either having a person do it or just having an AI do it. So this is really, I think, the dimension and the direction we need to move as societies, is thinking about how these technologies can augment our creativity, our critical thinking, our problem solving. This is the direction that we need to understand. So when you talk about social robots, that partnership, that is something we really need to understand how to design for these technologies. The other aspect of this is we need to help create a more AI literate society. A lot of people, they use these technologies. They don't even know they're using these technologies because they're embedded in our social media and our apps and so forth. But people just need to be more aware of these technologies and how they're used in their products and services. So to be able to use AI responsibly, to have an informed voice, to understand how they work well enough, to be able to have an informed voice of how you want them to be used in society, how you think about regulation. And then, of course, we need to have a far more diverse and inclusive set of designers and developers who create solutions with these technologies. Right now, I'd say it's a very unequal distribution across the globe of who can actually make things with AI. And this needs to be far more equitable around the world to create, again, a fair and just world. So, you know, with that, one of the big reasons why I'm here and why President Fernandez has invited me is we've been designing a lot of AI literacy curriculum for students, for K-12 students. This is called the Day of AI. And it is all about saying AI is for everyone. This is short form, multidisciplinary curriculum about AI applications and its responsible use that's creative, that engages critical thinking, hands-on making. And it's really for all students, for all teachers. All teachers can teach it. It's free. We have a lot of videos for professional development. So, you know, we've been launching this program for 2 years. There's over 10,000 teachers around the world in 114 countries that are already engaging in our curriculum. So again, I think this is important. This is important for how we prepare our children for a future, but also a reality they're already living in. And we are here because we are now collaborating with Bangladesh and OEI and other organizations. Our curriculum's already been translated into Spanish. It'll be translated to Portuguese. But just shows you already, even just in 1 year, many peoples across Spanish-speaking countries are starting to use this curriculum. So again, this is a big opportunity to bring this here to the Dominican Republic and to engage with teachers and parents and students in this AI literate future. So I'm excited to be here to help make that possible, and I will take questions. Thank you. All right. I'll need translation. Yeah. All right. So I think you have the microphone. Yes. Okay. Yes. Do you have the microphone? Okay. Okay. Buenas noches. I'll need a translation. Hang on. It's two. Is this? Okay.
Uno. Buenas noches, William Reyes. Primero, darle las gracias por su magistral ponencia. Y mi inquietud va focalizada a lo siguiente. Usted se refirió a los riesgos y a ciertas desventajas de algunos países. En ese tenor, ¿qué usted podría agregar con relación a la normativa que podría regular el desarrollo y la aplicación de la inteligencia artificial? Debido a que el título de su conferencia es Viviendo con la inteligencia artificial. Y la norma es lo que nos permite vivir en sociedad. Muchas gracias.
Yes. Yes. No, this is a very timely topic and question, and it's becoming a global conversation. So the question of AI regulation and norms and so forth is something that we're starting to see different countries propose different policies. So I mean, the classic ones that people often talk about are things like privacy and transparency and accountability. There's a question around things like even how you label data to train these systems can enter bias into these systems. So there's many, I think, facets of regulation and policy and norms that's going to be important. I think it's also adding, to the opportunity of a global dialogue, because many companies who produce these products and services are global companies. If it's digital, it can go across the world. So how we can align those across different governments is going to be important. So if your product works in one region of the world, ideally it would also work in another. So I think there's a global opportunity to come up with thinking about what are the reasonable norms and policies and regulations for these things. So it's an evolving space, but I think for the first time, fairly recently, even the big tech companies, the CEOs of big tech companies have been encouraging and saying it's time to regulate these technologies. So it's an evolving landscape, but I think it's the right direction now. So another question? Mm-hmm.
Buenas noches, gracias por la oportunidad. Profesor René Figueroa, del área de Educación Física. Tengo una inquietud, y es que por lo menos en el área de nosotros, del área de Educación Física, batallamos bastante por hacer que los niños interactúen un poquito más con el medio ambiente por el tema de la tecnología. ¿Han hecho algún tipo de previsión ustedes en cuanto a que el niño o un adulto se haga dependiente de la interacción con la inteligencia artificial?
Yeah, so this is another really important question. So I think we've all seen the effect of children and screens, whether it's a phone or a tablet or a computer, where it kind of sucks in their full attention. They start to kind of shut out kind of the other people around them in the room. One of the things that's really interesting, and we've studied this with social robots, is because it's socially embodied, people around the robot are included in that interaction. So when you talk about the importance of nurturing interpersonal interactions, this seems to be a technology that encourages and supports multi-party interactions in a way that we don't really see with these other kind of pure screen-based technologies. So I think this is an important thing that we are trying to study, because we see too much of kind of children, again, kind of shutting the social world out when we know it's really critical for their development. So how we think about the design of technologies that support interpersonal face-to-face is important. So again, this is a technology that we're seeing promise around that. And in fact, we can design it to show increased engagement around the people around the robot as well. So thinking about the robot as a social catalyst. So that's an area of research, I would say, but I think it's an important value that we want to think about including in how we design these technologies, especially in environments with children who are developing. Around the question of, you don't want to design these technologies to be a crutch. You want them to be a ladder that brings you to an enhanced level of performance. You don't want people to forever be overly reliant on it. So in that last example I gave you around mental health, when we did the delayed post test, we do a lot of work in how the robot is introduced in kind of this interventional context, and then how the robot is removed. So we intentionally try to design for that transition of the robot is there, supports you, you've learned, you've grown in important ways, you don't need the robot, we're going to take the robot back, and how that transition happens. So one of the exciting things about that study I showed you was that even after the delayed post test, when the robot was gone, people were still demonstrating the benefits from the intervention they acquired with the robot. So I think more evaluations like that are needed, because yes, we do not want to be creating technologies that are a crutch. We want to build ladders. So thank you for the question.
Buenas noches. Thank you very much for the excellent talk.
Mm.
I have a bit of a slightly technical question. I was wondering, what do you think are the limits of the depth of the engagement that you can achieve with, say, adult populations or with populations that are from different cultures?
Yeah.
Like, how far do you think this technology can generalize to other use cases, especially given the fact that at the end of the day, all social robots, there's really no one home there. It's all kind of an illusion, or maybe you have a different perspective. Does that really present any fundamental limits to the assistance that it can provide? And if so, how?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, again, how you design and how you present the robot is very important, right? So in these cases, the robot is providing an educational or a skill intervention, and the robot is framing the interaction and the engagement in a way that kind of explains why these skills matter. In the case of positive psychology, why they're valuable. And those are skills that, again, people can continue on long after the robot is gone. You know, I think as I was showing, you know, in the case of the young children, they are understanding this is not a human experience, and it's okay. It's not as if you need human level intelligence and social interaction to get the benefits. And so, you know, by designing these robots to be cute and fluffy and clearly not human, that's very intentional on our part, so that we can show that children are kind of being able to understand and frame an appropriate sort of understanding of the capabilities, the social emotional capabilities of the robot. I mean, they kind of do see it kind of like an intelligent pet. So not like another child, or certainly not like an adult, but kind of like I call it the Disney sidekick, kind of like that. And even so, that is, you know, we're seeing real positive benefit from that. So I think this assumption that it has to be human-like to be effective, I don't think that's the case, actually. You just have to frame it in an appropriate way, and then think about how that technology supports the larger human care network, which could involve parents or teachers or doctors, right? So we view these technologies as a part of the team. So in the educational context, we design them with teachers. So teachers are the teachers, right? But the robot is a practice partner, right? And so teachers find a lot of value in that. That helps me be able to give more personalized attention to students who may need it, or I can know that children are still doing valuable practicing with the robot. So, and the robot is actually able to, you know, track those interactions, the vocabulary, and give that feedback to the teacher, so the teacher feels they have a better sense of what children are able to learn. So anyway, so just thinking about, again, the team, I think is an important attribute of how to design these technologies, but they don't have to be human-like or human equivalent to be beneficial.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So I completely agree that it doesn't have to be human-like or human level to be effective in certain contexts. But I was wondering in terms of whether or not there are any fundamental limits that would require this kind of human level intelligence, or at least interface in order to be effective. Especially because one thing I was wondering about in your test, in your experiment with the individuals during the COVID crisis, I was wondering, well, maybe they were so cooperative because they knew that there was like a research team behind this, and they were more willing to, you know, provide full responses because they knew that they were at least going to be analyzed by actual human minds. So I was wondering whether maybe that's part of the reason why there was so much depth of engagement, and not necessarily it was completely triggered or generated simply by the actual social robot.
Yeah. So I would say, you know, in a lot of our studies, I mean, you try to recruit a large enough and a diverse enough population to try to get, you know, an overall kind of signal. You see a wide range of engagement with these technologies. In fact, we've been doing a number of studies that show even like different kind of personality attributes, like being more conscientious or neurotic, you know, can affect how they are inclined to engage with an experience like this. So there are certainly, I think, attributes of a person that this may be a better fit, and maybe a different kind of technology, like a wearable, might be better, more effective for a different kind of person. So I would never say this is a one-size-fits-all situation, but we're trying to understand, for whom can this be really effective and beneficial? But you do see, and I can tell you, we see a wide range of human engagement and behavior, but it's promising to see, overall, we see these positive trends. And so that's about really understanding for whom and why is this particular kind of technology effective. In terms of just the limits, I mean, I think, again, our philosophy is we don't think it makes sense to build AI systems that are like human plug compatible, because we have plenty of people, right? What's much more interesting is to think about how to design a technology that can complement us and what we do and what we bring. So we never think about what's the limit if it's not human, because we intentionally don't want them to be human. We really want to think about what are the skills and aptitudes and abilities of people, and then how does this need to be designed in a way that enhances and supports what we do. So that's just a philosophical framing.
Thank you.
Yep. You have a question here? Oh, over here? Yep.
Buenas noches, Margarito de los Santos. Tengo dos preguntas. ¿Cuál es la ventaja y desventaja sobre el uso de la inteligencia artificial en el proceso de aprendizaje del niño? Y segunda, ¿cuál es el impacto que se espera durante los próximos 5 años venideros sobre el uso de la inteligencia artificial en la sociedad? Muchas gracias.
IE, what does IE mean? AI? Oh, okay. So the first question, what is the advantages and disadvantages of AI in supporting children's learning? Okay. So again, I think the big envelope of advantage is the promise. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. The promise has always been kind of this vision of a personalized tutor for every child that's affordable and effective for them. A skilled human tutor is incredible, but, they can be expensive. They have to sleep. They're not necessarily always available when you want them. So I think for education, that's always been one of the big promises for students. I think one of the big opportunities for teachers that we're just starting to see requests for, at least for MIT Raise from teachers, is how can I use these technologies to help me in my teaching practice, to be able to save time, to be able to be more effective for my students. So I do think there's a big opportunity for teacher professional development and the responsible use of these tools and technologies to help them perform their role as teachers. So, I think the limitations will always center on, are you really designing kind of the tools and the solutions that help everyone be supported and effective in what they do? What often happens is if you design something that's a mismatch, then you're going to get a lesser result. That will be a limitation. So often it's a design question. Have you really designed the system, that is really addressing the needs and opportunities well? I really think it's kind of at the first level, that's kind of where we're at. It just needs to be a well-designed solution that really engages the stakeholders, teachers, students, parents, in that, to come up with something that they will want to use, that they see the value of. Often we've seen historical examples, if you just give a teacher something or give a doctor something, they may not want to use it because it doesn't solve a problem they care about, or it tries to do a part of their task that is something they enjoy, right? So you really need to position what the opportunity is in a way that your main stakeholders understands the value and sees the value in it. So I think it's a pretty, basic example, but I think it's where a lot of solutions fall short, is if they don't really think about what the problem to be solved and the opportunity is in a way that engages the users to want to adopt it. It's usually just disuse is the reason where the shortcomings are. Question? Yep.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, we have it here. Okay.
Yes, you mentioned the robots, you bring them home and they learn from you. So you teach them. So it's not a product that you ship and it comes prepackaged with how it's going to work. Now the question is, if the robot learns from your interactions, and these interactions are uploaded and shared with the other robots, what are the risks of doing that? And can it be manipulated or affected by the population that uses it? So you mentioned, like, if we have children with ADD or whatever, you know, will all the robots learn to react and interact with children that don't have ADD and will be affected? What happens when we upload this private and individual learning to the shared behavior of the robots and the AI in general?
Yeah, so you've raised two, I mean, these are two very important questions and concerns that come up when we talk about policy and regulation. So one is privacy. What data should be shared? Should people give explicit permission on what kind of data is shared? So lots of conversation around privacy and data. The other one that you mentioned is just, you know, if you're training your system on biased data, you can get biased behavior. And I think this also comes down to policies around how do you know that you have a representative data set? How do you know that the labeling of the data sets are appropriate, that you can try to anticipate biases that may exist in culture and you want to try to counteract that? So these are two very important conversations that are happening, particularly around data and machine learning models. Yeah. We good? All right. Thank you so much. Buenas noches, everyone.
Bueno, yo creo que hemos tenido una noche memorable hoy aquí en Funglode y por supuesto queremos empezar por darle las gracias a la profesora Cynthia Breazeal por haber aceptado nuestra invitación para compartir con nosotros esta magnífica presentación que ha tenido. Así que un fuerte aplauso para la profesora Cynthia Breazeal. Ahora, también el interés de poder contar con su presencia aquí hoy es para iniciar un debate sobre educación en República Dominicana. Generalmente no debatimos el tema educativo. En República Dominicana lo que tendemos es a presentar los problemas que tiene el sistema educativo nacional, cómo no avanzamos, sino que retrocedemos en muchos aspectos. Y vemos, sin embargo, que la educación va avanzando, ¿verdad?, a un ritmo y unos niveles que resultan sorprendentes. Bueno, entonces, además de la profesora Breazeal hoy, vendrán en este mes de agosto y septiembre dos profesores de España. Uno que es profesor Marino Fernández Engita, que es sociólogo de la educación, profesor en la Universidad Central de la Complutense de Madrid, y él va a tratar justamente, su último libro se llama La Quinta Ola, que es la educación en la era digital. Y tendremos al profesor Paolo Cosín Fernández también. No somos primos, los dos son Fernández, pero no hay ningún vínculo. Y él va a hablar sobre el tema de la lectura, sobre el hábito de lectura, y técnicas para aprender a desarrollar el hábito de lectura. Pero esta noche, ¿verdad?, al tratar el tema de inteligencia artificial, donde la profesora Breazeal es directora en el Media Lab del MIT, y donde su trabajo es diseñar justamente robots para diversas actividades como hemos visto esta noche. Entonces, como ven, la inteligencia artificial se aplica en todo. Se aplica en la salud, se aplica en la educación, se aplica en el transporte, se aplica en la logística. En cualquier actividad humana se aplica inteligencia artificial. Se ha popularizado mucho entre nosotros en los últimos tiempos porque tenemos el ChatGPT, el ChatGPT, y que nos resuelve muchas interrogantes, nos ahorra investigar, nos da resultados inmediatamente y eso, digamos, se ha ido popularizando. Pero lo fundamental es que, como presentó la profesora Breazeal, hemos suscrito un acuerdo entre el Instituto Tecnológico de Massachusetts, el programa RAISE, que es el que ella dirige, MIT RAISE, la Organización de Estados Iberoamericanos, la OEI, y Funglode, con la finalidad de incorporar a nuestros maestros en conocer cuál es el contenido curricular desde el kinder hasta el último año de bachillerato en lo que concierne al uso de la inteligencia artificial. En esos 12 años de educación formal, los estudiantes aprenderán al manejo de la inteligencia artificial, a diseñar programas de inteligencia artificial, ¿verdad? De tal forma que tendremos realmente estudiantes ya del siglo XXI, porque la tecnología va cambiando rápidamente y una forma de poder aprender de manera diferente, más rápida, acumular más información, es justamente a través de la inteligencia artificial. Llama la atención, ¿verdad?, que se habla de máquinas, porque son máquinas, socialmente responsables, socialmente inteligentes, que interactúan con el ser humano, sirviéndole de apoyo para que puedan desarrollar sus potencialidades creativas, para que tengan éxito, ¿no?, para que puedan desatar todo su poder creativo. En fin, de eso es que se trata. Ahora, la pregunta es, ¿van a sustituir los robots a los seres humanos? No. ¿Van a sustituir los robots a los profesores? No. ¿Van a sustituir a los médicos? No. Sirven de complemento. Entonces, un robot que está programado, ¿verdad?, ayuda al estudiante en un intercambio. Y ese intercambio, que resulta hasta agradable, ¿verdad?, porque tiene como un juguete al lado, facilita, primero, construcción de vocabulario, porque nos damos cuenta que muchas veces los estudiantes tienen lo que podríamos llamar, ¿verdad?, déficit de comprensión, sobre todo déficit de comprensión de lectura, por un problema de déficit de vocabulario. No entienden. Y cada área del conocimiento humano es un código lingüístico. Cada rama del conocimiento tiene un lenguaje especializado. Y aprender es descodificar el código. Entonces, la medicina tiene un lenguaje, el derecho tiene un lenguaje, las ingenierías tienen un lenguaje. Si yo soy capaz de descodificar su significado, aprendo. Si no, no puedo. Entonces, la inteligencia artificial, estos robots, se convierten en acompañantes de los estudiantes para facilitar el proceso de aprendizaje, y lo más importante es que personalizan el proceso de aprendizaje. Y es una tendencia de la educación a futuro. El tutor, ¿verdad?, que personaliza la educación, ahora tendremos al robot como complemento. Así pues que yo creo que vemos en qué dirección se mueve el mundo, en qué dirección se mueve la educación. Hemos hablado en otras ocasiones de STEM como sistema educativo. Después cambiamos por STEAM, porque faltaba la A, no solamente ciencia, tecnología, ingeniería y matemáticas, también hay que incluir ciencias humanas, las artes, valores cívicos, para que sea una educación integral. Entonces, con el acuerdo que hemos firmado con la Organización de Estados Iberoamericanos y con MIT, todos ustedes podrán acceder buscando la página web donde aparece este currículum. El currículum desde el kinder al 12º grado sobre el uso de inteligencia artificial. Vamos a tener intercambios permanentes con el MIT y con profesores de América Latina y de España, del mundo iberoamericano, para compartir experiencias que se van acumulando en el uso de la inteligencia artificial en distintos ámbitos, pero fundamentalmente en la educación, que es donde nosotros nos vamos a concentrar. Ya hay un profesor chileno, Linda, ¿verdad? Este profesor chileno fue que hizo la traducción al español de todo el contenido que el MIT ha presentado. Se va a traducir al portugués porque queremos que Brasil también sea parte del proyecto como América Latina. Entonces creo que en estos intercambios vamos definiendo ciertamente lo que puede ser una estrategia nacional de educación de inteligencia artificial. Ningún país todavía propiamente lo tiene. Es algo que está en construcción y se va a dar sobre la base del intercambio que podamos tener. Bueno, entonces con eso ya saben que es la primera de encuentros múltiples, el primero de encuentros múltiples que tendremos en el futuro para seguir profundizando y en el adiestramiento de nuestros profesores para utilizar estas tecnologías. Professor Breazeal, I want to thank you so much for accepting our invitation to participate in this opening debate about the future of AI in the Dominican Republic, especially in education. So we'll be having you again. This is just the beginning, right? So thank you so much for being here once again. And we truly appreciate everything you've said tonight. Bueno, muchas gracias a ustedes. Y con la inteligencia artificial es para adelante que vamos.